I've been fired with the.
I'm Chris McDonough, a retired homicide detective. I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room. And welcome to the interview room on this amazing Sunday evening. Put your seatbelts on. We've got a story for you that, this University of Idaho, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, it's like the gift that keeps on giving. If this is your first time with us, we're grateful that you're here. We only ask one thing, and that you sub to our channel and you share this information out to all of your friends and family on social media networks. I always want to thank our subs for being here and our Patreon members. Without you, the interview room does not exist. We're so grateful for you, as well as our mods. I think we have the best mods on YouTube. Mimi, J2, Maui Girl, and Tree Sam. Ladies, we can't thank you enough for everything that you do. And we certainly do love and appreciate all of your time. And of course, we miss Miss Sophia. Always going to miss Miss Sophia. As you can tell, my buddy, Dr. Gary Brucato, is back with us. He's a visiting scholar at Boston College, where he collaborates with Dr. Ann Burgess and Victor Petreka on forensic research. He studies, among other things, how violent thoughts and actions emerge in psychotic and non-psychotic persons. Gary is the co-author of the Columbia University Mass Murder Database. It's the largest in the world. If you want to know why people do crazy things, that's the guy, because he's also the co-author of The New Evil. By the way, go over on Amazon and pick this book up if you don't have a copy of it yet. The New Evil, Understanding the Emergence of Modern Violent Crime. And we have a special announcement tonight, because starting next week, we're going to do a weekly podcast with the lab, Dr. Brucato, and myself, and it's going to be called The Witness Box. And it's going to be an independent program, so we hope you guys can join us over there. And if you haven't noticed, my better half, my sweetheart, Ms. Karen, who has been after this from the first moment, all of this stuff started to unfold out there in Idaho. And we're so grateful for her. And she's an amazing mind. And tonight, ladies, this is total girl power here, because everything you're going to hear tonight, she has dug up. And let me tell you, it's disturbing. It's very disturbing. And I also want to tell everybody, thank you so much for treating the family of Kaylee last week, Steve and Christy, with such respect for their sweet daughter. And that reflects also on the three other victims, Madison, Xana, and Ethan in the Idaho 4. So we're so grateful for that. Karen, and if you guys haven't noticed, I know Gary has, but I married so far up, I can't even see straight. So tonight's show is going to be with Miss Karen going to town and helping us understand some of the other dynamics going on out there. So, Karen, what are we going to cover tonight?
Well, first, let me say it's great to be here, and it's great to be with you, Gary.
Welcome.
And this is going to be a fun times here. And also, congratulations for you, Chris and Josh, on your new podcast that's launching this coming week.
People are asking when and where, Chris.
So we're going to record once a week. It will drop every Wednesday, and it's going to be on all the podcast platforms. It's not going to be a YouTube or anything like that. It's going to be strictly a podcast, and the name of it is The Witness Box. And that kind of resonated when we were all thinking about it and collaborating. And of course, Dr. Gary's coming from the psychological side. I'm coming from the investigative side, but at the same time, Josh is coming from, a practical application, let's just ask questions, and he's going to kind of drive it. So it's going to be pretty fun. And it's going to be open up to a lot of different things. I think a lot of different things. You're going to hear some great comments. And I think we have, who's coming on for our very first program? Dr. Ramsland, Catherine Ramsland.
That'll be a great show.
It's going to be a great show because
great podcast.
She can just talk.
Are we allowed to tell them what it's about?
Well, let's surprise them. Let's surprise them with next Wednesday's first drop. And Dr. Gary will be on every episode. So everybody was wanting Dr. Gary to do a program. Well, his schedule is so jammed, we came up with this idea of let's just collaborate, and Josh is going to produce it and put it out, and Gary and I are going to be the on-air with him. So it ought to be a lot of fun, and we're going to talk about a lot of different things. So put your seatbelts on for that. But tonight,
and Chris, what I'll say very quickly is that what I hope we will do, I know we will strive to do, is to have one of the most, if not the most, victim-centered, professional, podcasts in the true crime field, because the field, unfortunately, I think is filled with a lot of stuff that either gives you bad information or comes from people who don't have that kind of background, or who don't have that sensitivity. There's too much emphasis on the gore and the crime, and I think it'll be a real shot in the arm for people who want that sensitivity and that intelligent discourse. It'll be an honor. Yeah,
that is a great point. Okay, so we've got a lot to cover tonight. Everybody, I'm here to tell you, put your seatbelts on. Buckle up, because I think we're going to go to about 100 in pursuit with probably a helicopter overhead on this one tonight, because my sweetheart, she never ceases to amaze me when she steps up and says, I got to show you this. And we got a lot to go for. So, honey, what are we going to talk about here? Where you want to go?
Well, tonight, this is about the University of Idaho and a scandal that's been going on that you may not have heard about. In fact, a lot of people hadn't heard about this. Dr. Gary shared it with us, and we did some research and jumped in, and this thing left us bewildered. So I felt it was really important, we all did, to bring it to you guys tonight. So what is going on here? So let's just start by saying that there are allegations involving the coach of the women's volleyball team at University of Idaho. And we are going to show you these are allegations at this point. We want to be very clear about that. But these are allegations of abuse, physical, emotional, mental abuse, that were reported to the college starting in 2022. So over 2 years ago, about 2 years ago. And the school did nothing about it. In fact, the complaints were dismissed. And yet all of this alleged abuse was still going on. And so just a summary, kind of a high level overview. We're going to get into and share what some of these allegations are by the team. Now, let's keep in mind, these are female athletes. These are girls, young women, we'll call them young women, they're mostly age 19 to 22, something like that. And they were what they were subjected to and dealt with this coach is nothing short of bewildering, infuriating, and leaves us scratching our head and wondering, is there a culture of indifference and institutional protection going on at the University of Idaho?
And the reason that struck a chord with us is the fact that when the house went down, Karen started asking this idea of, there's 3 girls in that house and 1 guy. And what is it with this president at the university, Scott Green, that he would not be sensitive to the fact that the case hasn't even gone to trial, and write this book, which he has, about managing different type of crises going on under the umbrella of the university and how to get through it. And then all of a sudden, Dr. Gary started, raising some comments about, hey, there's other things going on. Have you heard about the volleyball thing? And so Karen said, well, wait a minute, let me look into that, because is there a correlation? And this is just a question, right? My opinion. My question is there a correlation in any way about how women are treated on that university campus? And did that play into the decision of indifference to, I'll just make the house go away, make that go away too? And that's just my opinion. What do you guys think in the chat as we go along? I'm sorry, Karen, I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you.
you're good. No, you're good. It's a very legitimate question to raise and to talk about, for sure. And so I think the easiest way to handle this kind of, again, just do an overview, and then we'll get into what the allegations are. So this is the head coach for the women's volleyball team at University of Idaho. His name is Chris Gonzales. And what we know about Mr. Gonzalez is that in 21 years of coaching volleyball in the United States and apparently in Europe and in Japan, he's had 15 different jobs in the coaching world in 21 years. The University of Idaho, the athletic director, her name is Terry Golick. She brought this Chris Gonzalez into University of Idaho in 2022. And apparently, during the first season he was there, and at the end of the first season, the complaints started. And, thank goodness that these players felt like what they were experiencing, that they didn't just hold it in, that they did complain. Not only did the players complain, their parents complained. And what is that? So, emails were sent to President Scott Green, the athletic director, Terry Golick, another individual who's over Terry Golick, and other people. The dean of students was involved. So right from the beginning, his first season there was communication and documentation that there was physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, allegedly going on. One thing that kind of caught our attention too is, let me just also say, if you want to read for yourself more about this, the Orange County Register has an incredible series of articles. So all you need to do is just go on the internet, go look at the Orange County Register, and you'll see the reporter Scott Reed has done a wonderful job of talking to players and documenting all this. Now, ask yourself, why would a California newspaper cover University of Idaho, something going on with women's college sports? Well, Chris Gonzales used to coach some years back for Long Beach State University, and apparently there were players who complained about him at that university. And so, this newspaper, that reporter, he's dug up an incredible amount of information on this. And he's got things documented that go back about 20 years of this Chris Gonzalez's coaching where there were allegations. So I'll leave it at that for now. We're going to reference some of these articles because he did a marvelous job of reporting on this.
Yeah, and you have the formal complaint too, right, Karen?
We do. We have a copy of the formal complaint, which is online, and anybody can see it. And so when Chris Gonzales got to University of Idaho after the first season in 2022, at the end of 2022, so that would have been like November 2022, the complaints started coming in. One, as a side note, I thought this one left me scratching my head. Scott Green has a cousin, David Green. David Green's
You're going to love this, Gary.
David Green's daughter played on the volleyball team at University of Idaho. She was one of the people that signed a grievance list, so that would have crossed Scott Green's desk. And even after seeing that, along with parent complaints and letters coming in and emails coming in, Scott Green didn't do anything about it. The complaints were dismissed in 2022. So we thought, wow, he has I guess she would be a second cousin once removed. I don't know if she's not a niece, but even she played on the volleyball team, and she experienced what this Chris Gonzales was like, and that was not even enough to start an investigation at that point.
But Karen, just to be clear, to make sure that I and everybody else are following, the idea is that even at the time of hire, there would have been a list of complaints as long as your arm from various institutions. Is that correct?
It is, yeah, that is true, Gary. Had somebody done their homework and actually researched his background before they hired him. That's what it sounds like to us.
How many jobs did he have?
15 jobs in 21 years. 15
other coaching jobs in 21 years.
All right. We were saying just before the program, there was one report from a newspaper about a job he had, I believe, in Iowa, right? Where, how long ago was that, Karen? 2006 or something like that? If I remember the year.
It could have been, yeah.
But
we'll have to go back and look at.
That was the complaint from apparently someone who played on the team who reported having a rib broken. Okay, and that alone, I mean, would be adequate to prevent someone from moving on to other jobs if it were known. So it's one of those things where your mind is boggled by it. But okay, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding correctly. So this is what he's bringing to the table, and he winds up with getting hired. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and it gets better because it's fall of 2022, and we all know what happens in November. The four Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan are slaughtered at their house at 1122 King Street. Well, simultaneously, this new coach is brought in almost, just at the beginning of volleyball season, and immediately within, a short period of time, 13 of the volleyball players are filing a complaint about him. Not one. Now, one is brave enough to come out as kind of the representative of the group, but 13 different girls come to the forefront and say, there's a problem here. And what is the university doing? Simultaneously, Scott Green is writing a book about how he's handling crisis going on over at 1122 King Street, which is not even on the university, but within the university, he's got his own crisis and he's ignoring it at that point initially. And his own family member signs off that, yeah, this is happening to me too. And he still doesn't do anything about it until the pressure gets too great. And so, Karen, do you want me to put up the formal complaint, or where do you want to go?
Yeah, let's take a look at it. Let's let everybody see what these players, what these female athletes are talking about. And we'll go through and we'll highlight some of the main things here, just to give you an idea of what exactly we're talking about.
And Gary, as you analyze this, I'm really curious how it's going to play out in your mind, because when you see some of these allegations that they're adults. I mean, these young women have come forward and said, "Look, this is what he's doing," and then we have to, kind of look backwards and say, "Well, wait a minute. If he's done that here, what don't we know about over there?" And that's where Karen got hold of the Long Beach stuff in the Orange County Register. But go ahead.
Well, I feel sorry for anybody that falls into Karen's scope. I mean, she's got the tenacity of a lobster. When she gets her pincers on you, you're never getting away. But if you just go back to that picture for a second, I want to point something out before we even look at this, because the photo with the team. Because do you notice immediately how small he is compared to all these women?
Yeah.
I mean, look at some of them look like I could pick them up and yeet them across the room like a French fry. And the thing is, you have to bear that in mind psychologically. That has got to mean something in this story, right? So I just want to point that out immediately, because I mean, look at them next to him, right? I mean, think about.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Gary.
Kind of bear in mind how this guy's probably feeling, and then he's in this position of power and control over them, and can play out, let me put you in your place, that kind of thing. So you just want to kind of think about that a little bit. And the other thing that's going to be very interesting as we go throughout this conversation is that I think it's going to be conspicuous to people that are listening how many of the things that we glean from this sound Kohlberger-esque. They sound like the accusations that are made by people who are surrounded by him, right? And I want that to be in people's minds as we read this, because I think that starts getting to the heart of Karen's point about the idea of things that seem to get systematized in this place, but we don't know. So if we go anyway, let's go back to but I just wanted to point that out, because you see it right away, right? You can just picture this dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. But
so, Chris, go back to the complaint. We'll just go to page 1.
Here we go.
And I'm going to read the highlights. I know most of you can't see this. This print might be too small. But
and also before, honey, if any of this triggers anybody, if you're not feeling comfortable or anything like that in your own experiences, we always want to be sensitive to you as a victim as well. So if any of this triggers you in any way, shape, or form, please step away for a little bit, and then when you're feeling a little bit more healthy and comfortable, come back and watch it if that's something you need to do. I just wanted to put that out there before we get there. Go ahead, Karen.
Okay. So right away here, first paragraph, at least 13 players came forward. It says the student athletes experienced physical, emotional, verbal, and mental abuse. Through many abusive behaviors, Coach Gonzalez and his staff perpetuate a culture of harassment, bullying, and belittling. Many of the girls are now experiencing a marked decrease in mental and physical health. A little bit further down, it says the abuse, harassment, and bullying has gotten to the point where there's a decline in classroom performance, as well as a visible lack of success on the court. So obviously what these players were dealing with this coach, it wasn't just left on the volleyball court. It was brought into their whole college experience. Many of them suffered and apparently are still suffering serious mental health issues as a result. A little bit further down, it says the coaches disregards concerns and advice from medical professionals, continuing to expose the players to physical activities and exercises that hinder recovery and actively increase their chance of injury. Just to kind of summarize, and again, I'm going to be referring back to those newspaper articles from the Orange County Register newspaper. The journalist was able to talk with many of the players who experienced this. a number of them describe they take you into the volleyball practice, what it was like dealing with this coach. And a lot of these girls described they had pre-existing injuries, or the way that they were being made to do drills and practice exercises were very unorthodox and either led to injuries or exacerbated existing injuries, with the coach yelling at them, you're not tough enough, keep playing. And apparently it did a lot of physical harm. Some of the girls were out with surgeries. Some of them have had to leave the team totally as a result. And so that was one of the allegations that we read a lot about, and that was significant in this. And another thought about that. Do you guys have any thoughts about that while I'm
Well, the university became aware of this, right? And these are some of the allegations, and there's 11 pages of them here, and we're going to go through a lot of it. But tell them what they did. Tell them how the university tried to project independence in investigation.
Well, let's get that. That's kind of a whole other explanation.
Okay.
But I think it's helpful for everybody to get a sense of what we're talking about here. The other thing I was going to say is, let's remember. So these college athletes, a lot of these young women are on scholarship. They have played this sport for years. Some of them since maybe young kids. They've had a myriad of coaches along the way. They played on specialized teams. They're playing at a collegiate level. Most or many of them are on scholarship. Okay. So they've had a number of coaches in their, the last 10, 15 years. So that's what they're comparing it to. They've had a lot of very good coaches, strong coaches that they've been able to excel as athletes. So when they get this guy coming in, making them do these unorthodox drills, there's even one example, and I don't want to go too far in the weeds on this, but I guess one of the main things that volleyball players all know, industry-wide, if you will, you never have just idle volleyballs in the court. So it's like tennis, right? I mean, we all know professional tennis, there's a ball runner. You get that tennis ball off the court for a reason. Same thing with volleyball, okay? The balls don't stay in the court while there's live play. It's too dangerous. You've got all these kids going for the ball at once. People can break ankles, etc. And so it's like one of the, volleyball 101, you never have the volleyballs on the floor of the court. Okay. Coach Gonzalez has a drill where he purposely puts volleyballs on the floor in the court and makes the girls do these drills around it. When I read that, okay, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I thought, what the heck is that? Okay, I'm being gentle when I'm saying unorthodox, okay? It almost sounds deliberate. It almost sounds like if that was a deliberate move for the players to potentially get injured. So I'm real curious, Gary. I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but what's your thought? What would, when you hear something like that, what are you left thinking?
Well, first of all, let me emphasize that this is not somebody I've ever met or examined, or we're only going by things that can be gleaned from what is available publicly. But what I'll say is that I think there is a particular type of person, and where the idea is that you are in a position of power and helping, and you can do things that are ambiguous because you can say, well, it's just tough love. I'm doing this to kind of get you to, to have to work really hard to teach you a lesson, like Mr. Miyagi in the Karate Kid movie, where I made you stay up all night, waxing the fence, painting the fence and waxing the floor because I was trying to build your muscles and teach you to do better karate, right? But so that it can really be that what you're doing is something that's playing out a kind of a sadism or a desire to do something that risks hurting someone for one's own amusement, but it can be concealed in that way. And it starts to remind you a little bit of the thing from the Koberger situation, where we're told that a voice says, "I'm here to help." So that it's that idea of the you can't tell if a figure is there to help you or there to hurt you. And that starts to sound an awful lot like the dynamics we see, for example, in groomers and certain types of personalities, where the idea is you make it ambiguous, and then you can, but people walk away uncomfortable, and the whole idea is that you could say, "What? It was just tough love, just harsh discipline," and yet, broken rib. That kind of thing, right? And I think the audience doesn't realize yet how much of this there is. I mean, we're not talking about ambiguous comments. We're going to see, I think we're going to go through this a little bit, that this is stuff that if you heard it happen to your own daughter or your sister, you'd say, "You're getting off that team." This is not acceptable. And that's why I'm really glad we're going to walk through it, because I don't want people to think we're talking about stuff that's nebulous here. I mean, I read this stuff and I was like, what? Like one line of this would have been enough to terminate this situation. So you tell me. But do you see what I mean about the ambiguity?
Yeah, no, great point. So let's Chris, let's go to page 2.
Okay,
you're on there.
page
Okay,
2.
no, scroll up a little bit higher, under harassment. So again, these are the players outlining all of the allegations. They've got physical abuse, intimidation, retaliation, harassment, and then I noticed sending unwanted or inappropriate text messages to individual players.
What's
Wow.
that?
What's that? Yeah, give us an example of that, right?
And now all of a sudden, because of the Clery Act and Title IX, if that has some type of SA connection, we're not saying it does, but if it is, then Title IX kicks in and they have to report it and conduct an independent investigation. And now maybe we can talk about this investigation. An investigation kicks off.
Well, yeah, we will. Let's just go one more page to page 3. And I want to go to the top where I want to give people a real clear picture of what he was doing, again, back into these practices. So this is what the complaint says. It says, without the player's consent, Gonzalez grabbed the girls around the waist to lift them up. So I'm going to walk through this. During a practice, okay, he would come up behind the players without them knowing, and he would grab them around the waist and he would lift them up. Okay, this is under the guise of a blocking drill for volleyball. And he would start off saying, "This is not what it seems." Or he would say something like, "Please don't take this out of context." Grabs them around their waist, lifts them up, tells them to arch their back or get in some kind of a position of what volleyball players are supposed to be doing. My opinion, sounds very sketchy. And the girls felt violated and uncomfortable when he would do this. And then he says, "Don't take it out of context." Well, what context should they take it? Okay.
And then, Karen, am I correct that, forgive me, am I correct that, because I don't see it here unless my eye isn't catching it, that this is in the context where he also would allegedly draw attention to their bodies and comment that they didn't have the shape or the appearance that would be optimal, in his opinion, for the sport, whether it was the shape of the buttocks or the breasts or the waist or whatever, so that there's remarks that are made in addition to the touching.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to make sure, because I mean, as somebody who has dealt with a lot of these things before, that's like red flag, because there's something also very weird about the lack of judgment, that you would never say something like that especially nowadays, because of how it's going to be heard, and how what that could, there isn't even a self-preservation judgment. Like, oh, gee, that might be taken out of context. I could get in trouble for that. Forget about the second element and most important element, which is that you're hurting someone. But there's an odd judgment there, right? I mean, wouldn't you say? I mean, who would say that?
Yep. Yeah. So he would lift them up, and then when he'd put them back down, and he'd go, "Oh, I didn't think you were that heavy," or "Gosh, it took a lot to lift you up." And there's a whole long list of body shaming things that he would say daily to many girls on the team. Some of them are listed there. And and then he would tell some of them, yeah, my idea of an ideal volleyball player's type is long hamstrings, narrow hips, broad shoulders. He's actually describing a male body, just saying, okay. I mean, women have wider hips than men. That's just a fact of life, biological fact of life. He would say, oh, you're built like a linebacker, or you're bottom heavy. I mean, all of these things to these volleyball players. He would talk about their, quote, strong legs and strong butt. I mean, so far out of bounds, so inappropriate. Okay. Yes, very creepy.
Doesn't it remind you of when the story of when Koberger supposedly went on the date, and then the woman pretended she was throwing up in the bathroom so he would leave, and then he sent her a message supposedly that said, you have excellent birthing hips.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I remember
exactly.
It reminded me of that, man.
It did. Unbelievable.
But I mean, here's a guy, right? Here's a coach. He probably has female staff. Okay, that in today's day and age, I mean, we should all just know. No is no. That's what it means. No. Period.
Right.
Okay? It's off the table, especially to young, impressionable, almost, I mean, fine-tuned athletes, where these girls have gone through their whole, college or their high school years, and they've made it to the university level to play university, volleyball. And this guy in authority and power can hold over them. And there's this ability to say, you know what, if you don't keep improving, I'm going to jam you up on your scholarship. I'm going to do this. We don't know the totality, but that's some of the things the victims are alleging here. And I believe them, that, a lot of this stuff is over their head, power and authority. So, I mean, Gary, when you see stuff like this, just on what you just said a second ago about the correlation to Brian, and you see the stature of this guy that you pointed out in the beginning, right. I mean, what's a run here? What's going on here?
Well, look, I mean, again, we only have a little bit of information. We can only hypothesize, but I think a reasonable working hypothesis for both of them, right? If either of them is guilty of that of which they're accused, the idea would be a person who, for whatever reason, feels inadequate and gets themselves into a position of power, which then allows for a leveling of the playing field through a kind of nasty, sadistic, condescending treatment, probably toward women over men. For example, you wonder if, any male who was involved in the team would have the same thing happen. If this is supposedly the perfect body of a player, for example, would you make the same comment toward a man, that they had to have a certain perfect body? Or, you don't know, but you get the sense of using the cover of a certain position to take out to exact a petty revenge against people who make you feel a certain way. And this is just a hypothesis, but it's interesting because some of this is so over the top. And incidentally, wasn't the body shaming also associated with food restriction?
Absolutely. And great segue. So some of the complaints were about not just body image, but right along with it, a lot of them said that he would withhold food from the players. The scenario that they gave was something like this. When they traveled, here's the typical day for these female players. They wake up in the morning early. They have a workout, a volleyball team workout. They go to class all day. They get to the airport in the evening. They fly to wherever, for the next competition. They get in late, maybe 11 o'clock, midnight, or whatever. Some of them haven't eaten since 8 or 10 hours, and the competition's the next day. And he would say he would not allow them to eat. Or there's an example that somebody was so starving they went and got a calzone somewhere. I know it may sound silly.
Even buddies,
and then
buddies,
even buddies.
Yeah, even buddies.
And this girl who went and got a calzone to eat because she was so starving, because it was like this long day with no food, and he punished her. I believe she wasn't allowed to play the next day. I think that was part of the complaints. And they would provide some very, very small, like under 500 calorie, pretzels and a banana or something like that, as like, oh, well, you can eat that for the whole day that we're traveling. And these are athletes. These are people burning a lot of calories. And so a lot of players said that they were lightheaded, they felt faint, they felt sick, because they were forced to play many times after long periods of, with no food, and the coach wouldn't let them eat.
I mean, contrast that with in that county. You have a coach at the University of Idaho telling these collegiate athletes, okay, he's body shaming them. I mean, one of the comments here, look at the top one. I've coached much, 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 much better players than you, and they won't even consider doing something like that. Who coaches like that, number one? I don't get that, because that's definitely not going to motivate somebody. But now you're told you can't have any food. Yet on the other side in the county jail, Brian Koberger saying, I need vegan meals. And it's just like this dynamic within that community or that county in my mind is like, what is going on over there? What is going on? And that just kind of led us into, that idea, is this, are there more things going on that we don't know about? And we're learning day by day that, yeah, there's a lot of secrets. There's a lot of secrets over there. But we're gonna keep digging. All right, Karen, where do you want me to go?
We can kind of jump over to the university's response if you want to.
Sure. Yeah, hang on for a second.
Karen, how many people made this complaint?
So this particular complaint, I believe there's 13 to 14 of the players. And I believe there's only 18 players on the team. Don't quote me on that. I think it's something like that. So this is a huge percentage of the team. And I want to also point out that this coach, Chris Gonzales, recruited girls from Europe and Eastern Europe that are now players on the University of Idaho team. 2 or 3 of them are from the country of Turkey. 2 of them are from Poland. 1 of them is from Spain. And we know that Chris Gonzales was a coach, did some kind of coaching, volleyball coaching abroad, overseas. I haven't seen anything, there's some information about that, even in Japan. And so he recruited these girls. And what's kind of interesting is they have a certain look. They're beautiful girls. They all have like dark hair and kind of similar features. And we have not heard from those girls. Now, we're not, calling them out in any way, shape, or form. But the reality is, if he recruited these girls from overseas and brought them here, they are going to be far more vulnerable and to his abusive ways, his allegedly abusive ways. And I wouldn't expect necessarily for them to come out and add their names to this. I feel like they've got so much more at stake. There's so much more to lose. And, we don't really know what conversations have been said or not said with those girls who maybe don't speak the language and are not familiar. They're here to play volleyball, and everything is riding on those scholarships that have brought them over here. Gary, what do you think about that?
I think it's entirely possible. I mean, but unfortunately, without a little more information, we can't tell exactly what the heck is going on. But there does seem to be this conspicuous fragmentation in terms of who gets targeted and who doesn't, or at least doesn't feel comfortable to say anything. My problem with this is how many complaints there are in this institution alone, because as I understand it, this went on for years before a formal process was opened, unless I'm very much mistaken. And I cannot understand that. One of these complaints would be enough to put someone on leave and then investigate them instantly. And this went on for a very long time. That I don't know how that could be explained. I wonder if either of you has an explanation, because I mean, you know how it is at any institution. If somebody walks in and, let's say, to a guidance office and says, listen, I'm uncomfortable because my coach made some comment about my breasts or my butt, my buttocks or whatever, and I'm feeling really weird about it. There would be an instantaneous reaction where they would then go and talk to all the other team members and teachers and the whole thing. But this is years. And I can't, it almost, I guess what I'm afraid of, having talked to people who've been involved at other institutions in Title IX complaints and things like that, what I'm worried about is that it put the idea in the women's minds that they were making it up in their head, or that it was invalid, or they were interpreting incorrectly, so that it, and even if they're talking to each other, you could imagine one of them saying, yeah, but if it were real, they would have taken it more seriously. Maybe we're reading it the wrong way, so it has a way of invalidating. And I really want to drive that home, because if that's happening to someone in the audience, don't be gaslit. That should not be happening to you. Make a lot of noise about it, because I and the other thing is, they did make a lot of noise and nothing happened. So I just want to, Karen, I know you can speak eloquently about this because you've been looking into it, but are those facts as I'm laying them out accurate?
Unfortunately, they are, Gary. So if we go further down on this complaint, the girls, the players, were complaining, and they were asking for meetings the whole time. Okay, the whole time. The first time there's a meeting is October, I believe it's October 30th, 2023. So what, 6 months ago, something like that. And okay, so who do they meet with? They meet with the athletic director, a woman named Terry Golick, who hired Chris Gonzales. I believe the dean of students, Blaine Eccles. Interestingly enough, he's also mentioned in Scott Green's book. We'll set that aside momentarily. And another coach, Chris Walsh, who is over Coach Gonzalez. Okay, so the players finally get this meeting, and they go through the allegations, and basically, according to this, they were dismissed. Their complaints were dismissed. They weren't heard. They were not told that anything substantively was going to come out of it. And here's the worst part. If you go to page 7, Chris, I don't know if you're able to, but I'm going to read it anyway. At this meeting, okay, Gary, this is exactly what you were just talking about. At this meeting, you've got Chris Gonzales, the coach, this Chris Walsh, who I think is his boss, Kate Brown, I believe she's another one of the coaches that worked with Chris. They met with one of the players who has been very outspoken about this. And they told her that she was, quote, a red flag for suicide for complaining.
Wow.
Wow is right. Okay, get this. So there's more. Chris Gonzales was made aware of prior mental health problems that this particular student player experienced. And this assistant coach was kept loosely appraised of current psychological medications and this player's overall status.
It's
However,
right there. There it is.
Yeah, the intervention was aggressive and concerning from this player's viewpoint, especially considering this the case is someone who was actually having mental health struggles. And it says intermission like this would have discouraged any further communication or seeking help. So this, let's just call this what this is. And this was so infuriating to me I could not believe it. She's one of the players that said, look, this has been going on. It's not just this year, it was the previous year. There's other players just at University of Idaho. You know, we've come to find out there's a long list of other people at other schools who had similar complaints. And what do these people do? They say she's a, quote, red flag for suicide. Are you kidding me? Gary.
A 20-year-old college student.
20-year-old college student.
Well, all right. This is very complicated, and let me be clear that I am equally infuriated, and I'm trying not to projectile vomit and scream, at the same time as I hear this. But in fairness, in the course of an investigation, if you're dealing, let's say we had a he said, she said situation where you have one student saying something that is not corroborated, then it would be valuable to know if the person were suffering from something that might distort their point of view. There was some emotional health issues there. It was activating, of their own trauma, whatever. But when you're talking about 13 people, then pointing out the mental health status of one of them becomes a little weird to me. I don't understand what that's about. In fact, the way you should see it is, personal opinion, is that person is more vulnerable to what is happening to them. And as a consequence, it's more like that's a red flag for abuse, right? As opposed to that's a red flag that you're going to take this away, that it isn't meant and you're in danger. I really want to pause a minute and just really drive home that it really is dangerous to invalidate a person, because you make the person think that they're making something up in their head, and the person may become emotionally unwell as a result of that. But it's the event happening to them. It's not the other way around. You're a vulnerable person. This happens to you, and it's your own fault. Is repulsive. It should be seen as maybe this is contributing to what's going on with you. But we don't, I don't know the facts of the story. I can only tell you based on what you're saying. Yeah, it's pretty gross, and I don't know the context of it, but I just want to drive this point home over and over and over and over again, that what you're seeing here, at least superficially, based on the facts we're hearing, it starts to sound an awful lot like a large-scale abusive relationship, right? A lot of the same stuff that like a woman or a man who is friends with you or something might say. I've got this partner and, they say these things to me and I walk away feeling like a crumb, but like they love me, they take care of me. Maybe I'm taking it the wrong way, maybe, I'm just getting so depressed. I don't even want to be alive anymore because I feel like I'm losing my mind. He looks me dead in the eye and he says, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, what do you mean I'm mean to you? Like, didn't I bring you flowers yesterday? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, yeah, you brought me flowers after you slapped me, that kind of thing. It feels like the what you hear in an abusive dynamic. And I just think it smacks of gaslighting, which is one of the classic techniques that's used. But we don't know. I can't help but think that the audience probably agrees that it smacks of the dynamics you hear in those kind of does it to the two of you?
Yeah, I mean, for
Absolutely.
me, yeah, and it's worse in my mind because at the same time you have this other situation, unfolding over on King Street, and you have this poor student who has the courage, and in my opinion, if she ever came to my office and I was an investigator and she told me this, I would be like, who said that? And how many other girls? There are 12 other girls. So there's a total of 13 of you, and they said something to you? Yeah. That young lady, and we all know who she is because she's on the news, she has enough courage to come forward and say, this needs to stop, because what she's really doing is she is helping and defending the other 12 women in, that group. And she's trying to prevent somebody from hurting themselves. That's what she's really doing, in my opinion. And they're turning it on her, which is just unacceptable. Just unacceptable. They're controlling the narrative by putting this young lady in an abusive situation. Wouldn't you say, Dr. Brucato? I don't know.
Certainly possible. I mean, without the further details, I don't know exactly what the heck is going on here, but that's what it seems like looking at it from out here. And I just, my heart breaks hearing the story, because I mean, that's why these institutions exist, is for you, you're encouraged to say something, and then when you do, it's like there's a foregone conclusion that this person can't be wrong, and therefore the person making the complaint is a crazy person, or we have to worry about them. And I just think it's very ugly, and it also would make everybody else afraid to say something. It feels like the trickle down effect of, a person will say, I don't even bother, it's going to get dismissed. You're going to walk out of there feeling like it's you, I mean, that's the whole thing. And it seems almost designed to discourage anybody else from saying anything.
Well, and it gets worse. If you could think it could get worse, it gets worse, because they say, okay, well, you know what, we'll kind of kick off a little investigation here. Okay. And Karen, fill everybody into where do you want me to go now? We're on page 8.
Well, we can talk. Let's talk about the I call it a so-called investigation. So, the school is under Title IX required, as far as I know, to do an independent investigation. Okay, but the independent investigation going on here, which apparently is, I guess this is fairly common at other universities that have similar situations. And in this case, it's really an internal investigation. So, okay, what do I mean by that? So the players go to the Office of Civil Rights and Investigation. That is a division, under the admin of the university. And the person in charge over there is an attorney. And she also, so she's employed by University of Idaho. She also is employed by a Texas law firm that Scott Green chose to do this so-called investigation. So let me get this right. It's not really an outside law firm that's doing it, because you have a staff member who is leading the investigation. She's on your staff and she's involved with that law firm. Okay. So they do an investigation, and I just want to say, I've spoken with a lot of different people in this field. I spoke with a couple prominent attorneys who represent SA victims as plaintiffs against universities. In fact, one of these attorneys represented girls who were abused by Dr. Larry Nassar at Michigan State University. So this person is absolutely an expert in this. And what they see typically is, this lawyer explained, that these universities are allowed to do their own investigation, and then at the end they don't release the results. But during the investigation, nobody's to blame. They end up, nobody did anything wrong. Typically, this is a typical thing. Okay. Well, at University of Idaho, when the investigation's done, it's going to Scott Green, and then Scott Green is going to decide what happens.
But here's a kicker to this, Gary. They're dragging their feet, I think, on purpose, because there's a 6-month window that these young ladies would have for any civil action if he's found guilty in that investigation. And so what the university has done is somebody assigned, I mean, think about it. The girls come and say to the Office of Civil Rights, look, this is what's going on. This major 11-page document is put out. The Orange County Register gets hold of it in Orange County in California. They do a whole expose on it. In fact, I would encourage you, and Karen mentioned it earlier, go to the Orange County Register. There's a paywall. They have it behind that paywall. Pay the money. It's worth it if you live near that university up there. And what ends up happening is the university, again, circles the wagons. Okay? They circled the wagons the morning that Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan were murdered. That morning, they circled the wagons with a communications team, with facilities teams, with all kinds of teams. They were meeting with the cops, and they were making decisions about a criminal event that was taking place. To me, Scott Green needs to be really questioned under voir dire with, some skilled attorneys on the other side. Because in this situation, they're also dealing with now 13 members of a sports team. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'll put money on it. There are other sports teams, I bet, where similar stuff is taking place, and the university has been successful, sweeping it under the rug. But in this case, you have these girls coming out and saying, hey, this is all going on here. And what does he do? He says, no problem. Go down the hall, talk to the civil rights staff member. And she says, hey, no problem. We're going to investigate this. You guys all settle down. But you know what? You could be suicidal. So we're going to be really sensitive for you. Okay. Which is a bunch of hogwash. And what does she do? She turns around and she picks up the phone and calls her old law firm. Her law firm. And says, hey, I've got a job for you. Now, does this sound familiar? Where is the $198,000 that was spent for the consultants on the security at the University of Idaho? Scott Green, I want to know where that money is. And because you have now also impacted families like Kaylee's, who were on here last week, by your ignorance in relationship to getting involved in things that you shouldn't be involved in. It's just not a business. We're talking about people's lives here, the rest of their lives. And so what happens? This new organization now is investigating this problem with these 13 members of this volleyball team. And I predict they're going to try to drag it out and kind of make it go away. Just make it go away. Oh, by God, the 6-month statute of limitations is over. So if anybody knows any of the girls on that volleyball team, have them watch this program and let them know there's a window. There is a window. You can file a claim now if you feel you've been violated. Don't wait. Do not wait.
And let me jump in here. The sad thing about this whole thing that, universities are supposedly investigating it, unfortunately, we have other examples. We've got Penn State with Jerry Sandusky. We've got Michigan State with Larry Nassar. It comes down to civil lawsuits, unfortunately. And so what happens, really the only recourse, and I'm talking in general, I'm not talking specifically to University of Idaho at all at this point. I'm just saying, when this type of situation happens, these players really only have, because their universities do nothing, they have to file a civil suit. So the great thing about the civil suit is that everybody gets depositioned. And so that's when all of the details come out. And what happens typically is that these civil lawsuits, these civil attorneys, they end up getting a mountain of evidence or a stack of evidence, and then they can hand it off to the prosecutor, whether it's a state attorney general or a local prosecutor, and then there's a criminal case. I also want to make this point very clear. In general, I did mention Penn State and Michigan State. In those cases, there were also not just the perpetrator, okay, not just the coach, the assistant coach, who were found in those cases. That's what I'm talking, not University of Idaho. Those cases, they were criminally charged. And actually, both of those individuals are serving life and beyond in prison. Also worth noting is the university presidents, the athletic directors, and one other school official were also brought up on criminal charges for doing nothing, for covering up this, not just bad behavior, but in those cases, criminal behavior. So that scenario is unfortunately a process that has to unfold through a civil lawsuit. But there are lessons to learn here. There are lessons to learn that there's culpability from university presidents and athletic directors. There's precedent. We've seen it. We've seen this story before. And unfortunately, we've seen how it plays out. The thing with this that really gets to me is that these are our daughters. These are our granddaughters, our daughters, our sisters, our cousins. These are girls, as I said at the beginning, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. And they're suffering. This is taking an emotional toll out of many of them. We also know that many of them have left the team. Many of them transferred out of the University of Idaho to other schools to play volleyball and are thriving. Some of them who weren't able to transfer schools are suffering right now because of this. And we know this because of the documentation that these 13 or 14 players who've come forward that they've shared. That's the heartbreaking thing here, that there is suffering going on. And I think it's absolutely worth going back to questioning, is there a culture, I'm going to ask this question again, just rhetorically for us to talk about, is there a culture of indifference at the University of Idaho when it comes to female athletes complaining, when it comes to students who were murdered off campus? Is there institutional protection going on? We've seen it at many other places. Are we seeing it here?
Right. Well, Karen, one of the things that I think you're picking up on is that there seems to be a kind of tone deafness to things that have to do with feeling out the way that a sensitive, normal human being would feel about a certain thing. And I think that's where it starts getting into things like tearing the house down, even if there were family members in the Koberger situation who didn't want that to happen, and the way that this was handled. And I think, it's important to remember, C. Scott Green has two adult children, one of whom is a daughter. And I just think that the best way to handle it might be to say, imagine your own daughter came home from school and said, you know what my coach did today? He didn't let me eat because he doesn't like the look of my rear end. And he lifted me up in the air to feel my waist, and then told me my body was wrong. And now I'm not allowed to eat. I just wonder what you think about that. I cannot imagine that any father in this world wouldn't say, what? What are you talking about? And then imagine hearing that about somebody else's kids, and 2 years go by and nothing has happened. There's something about that I can't wrap my head around. And so then you wonder, is there institutional denial? Is there institutional rationalization? Is there institutional? So that's a little weird. The other thing I'll say is, to Chris's point, and I love how passionate you guys are over this, because I think it really is hideous, is that the good thing is that now that these women have come forward bravely, there now is a kind of court of public opinion situation. And whatever happens at this university, whatever happens in terms of litigation, people know now that there's been this kind of smoke surrounding this person who for some reason has slipped through the cracks for years, right? So now what happens if, let's say, his job fell apart and he were to try to get hired somewhere else? Well, now it's out there. Now there's no, I didn't know, And I think at the end of the day, it was very brave to put it out there. So I think what the women are doing is they're basically saying, rather than letting ourselves be gaslit, we're going to take it to the public where it's outside the institution, and then we'll see if the public agrees that this is made up in our heads and it isn't that big of a deal. And of course, as soon as you do that, you've got the whole world looking at this going, no, that's unacceptable. But I'm just curious what you guys think about my point about appealing to the reality that he has a daughter.
Well, he also has a family member who was on that team that came to him.
Well, there is that too, Chris.
That's right.
and
Yeah.
said, I need you to do something. Please stop. Make this stop. It's his own blood. Right? I mean, to your point, to the daughter. Okay. It's his cousin's daughter. So it's a second cousin or whatever it is. Okay. But she's in this picture. And she comes to him and says, Scott, I signed the petition. I signed this over here and said, this is happening. Make it stop. And what does he do? Nothing. He writes a book. And I think this is really telling here too, but I'm going to share this here. Look, this is 3 days after the murders. 3 days after the murders. Okay. This is where they're meeting with coaches and they're having these conversations, 2 assistants coaches, blah, blah, blah. This is 4 days after the murders. They were scheduled to travel to Eastern Washington, right? 1:30. Now, remember, all of that money was petitioned to work on counseling and to help, all the kids at the university because they too were suffering. Okay. And yet here is a group of players coming to the university and saying on the 17th of November, 2022, 4 days after the homicides, hey, there's problems here. We were told to get food at that time, eat granola bars. Okay. These kids are being told what to eat.
It's all about control, Chris. I mean, that's the whole thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And so now you have this culture. It's playing out with the volleyball players. Simultaneously, this is what they know. Okay. So what do they do? They circle the wagons. Okay. And everybody comes in and goes, okay, how do we control this? How do we control this narrative? How do we control this? Well, meanwhile, you have these family members, 3 of the 4 specifically, are just trying to get information on their child. And later on, they have to go through this whole frustration point of why did you guys tear that house down? Why couldn't you have just waited? Why couldn't you wait? Please.
Tone deafness.
Right. And
that's
so
how it comes across, tone deafness.
So from a psychological point, Gary, I mean, what is that? What is it in the human condition that structurally a university can be thinking like that? Here's a question for you that came at you here.
Yeah, I was thinking about this question. It's very complicated because, a person could write a whole book on this topic, right? Because the institutions do have built into them all kinds of institutionalized problems like this. I think I was just talking to somebody recently about how there needs to be a total overhaul of the way that the process works, because it has a way of protecting and elevating the privileged person that works within the institution and leaving the individual who's making the complaint feeling small and alone and like they're standing up to someone who could easily crush them or ruin their future. And then people become afraid to say anything. They keep their mouths shut. You have to remember that at the end of the day, these dynamics are very similar to the dynamics you encounter in the way people feel about their parents when parents are abusive to them. Because when a little kid, for example, comes into treatment or goes to law enforcement, is talking to law enforcement or a social worker for child protective services or something, that child has in their mind not only the idea that something is happening to them that makes them unhappy, but they also know that if they make mommy or daddy mad, they won't eat. They won't get taken care of. They could get hit. They could get thrown out. They could get punished. So that the kid has to feel out, do I tell the truth or do I protect myself, right? And then on top of that, there's the confusion about whether what the parents are doing is loving and it's just in your head. So then you're thinking, well, maybe I just think they're mean, but maybe that's just how they discipline me, but so that you have this confusion mixed with self-preservation that takes over. And I think you see exactly the same thing in an institution. The person is thinking, I need this degree. You know, it would be hard for me to get into another school, maybe a school is good in my mind, or to get to, on this team, or what are my teammates going to think of me, or what? And it's totally depressing that a person has to make considerations like that, but that's just what people do. And there's something about the design of the way it works within institutions that I think lends itself to people having to go through a thought process like that. And it's really gross, And the other thing is, I really think we have to clarify something based on what I'm seeing in the chat. There are people that are reacting to this saying, well, what's the big deal? He's on leave. The school put him on administrative leave. But I think we have to emphasize when that happened. Right, Karen? I mean, going on administrative leave was not 2 years ago. Right.
No.
I mean, do you want to maybe say something about that? Because I think it'll make people understand what's so weird about this situation.
Sure. So let's just continue on with this timeline, which will clear things up. So so let's go back to October 30th. That's when the players sat down with the people from the school, and one of the players was told, it's all in your head. And I'm paraphrasing and saying it very nicely. And then in December, this big article came out in the Orange County Register detailing everything. Okay, you guys can go search it and go read it. In January is when, obviously it's public pressure, media pressure. They don't want to look bad. So that's when you see in subsequent articles that the school told the players, well, you don't have to go to practice with him. Okay. And then they said, well, we'll have one of our admin people monitor the practices to see what's going on. Well, duh, too little, too late. Of course, the coach is going to be on his best behavior if there's a hall monitor, if you will, in there. So that's foolish. And then they told the girls, first they told the team, you have to show up at practice. And then a few weeks later, they said, well, you don't have to show up at practice. And then on April 1st, 13 days ago, the coach was placed on paid admin leave. This guy is still getting his paycheck. Okay. So, before the allegations have been flushed through, he's on paid admin leave. Okay. Well, where does that leave everybody else? I do want to make this point here, and it's kind of off of what you were saying, Gary, but I think, aside from the mental emotional side, I think we have maybe these false notions that lessons have been learned at these universities from the sad experiences that went on. I'm talking about the Sandusky scandal at Penn State, which we mentioned, and the Nassar scandal, which not only involved Michigan State, but U.S. Olympic athletes. These were gymnasts. And people were fired, multi-million-dollar lawsuits. You guys probably don't. I was shocked to read this. Michigan State, or I should say, the victims of Larry Nassar, they were paid $500 million from Michigan State, but obviously insurance carriers, and then another over $300 million from the Olympic team. Okay, because that guy's crimes were going on for 20 plus years, and he was protected, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. You send your kid to a university and you think, oh, okay, well, I don't have to worry about something like Penn State happening or Michigan State happening. Clearly, the administrative people and the president of these universities would learn their lessons from those experiences, and we wouldn't see repeats. Obviously, that doesn't happen. I guess that's very naive to think, but I also think it may be naive, but why shouldn't we expect them to clean up their acts or at least learn from those? Why is the university president installed and not going, I don't want to have the ending how Michigan State ended or Penn State. I'm going to take these complaints seriously. I guess that's the piece that is bewildering as well. And it probably leaves a lot of us just unsettled, just, I don't even know what the right word is, but just beyond disappointed. And, this stuff is infuriating to know that it's happening to, it could be our daughters or our granddaughters, but that any of these team members had to suffer mental abuse because a guy like this guy is allowed to be hired and brought in and then essentially protected for a couple of years.
Yeah. Well, look, Karen, remember with the Nasser case, the allegations went back to about 1997, and actions really weren't taken by, USA Gymnastics, etc., until something like 20 years later or something like that, if I remember. I mean, you're talking about a pattern that seems to occur at a lot of places. And I think someone, perhaps I could talk to Dr. Burgess about this. And Burgess, in my work at Boston College, I work with her routinely about systematically studying what goes on here, because it does seem to be a narrative that unfolds too much. And there has to be something to it. But what you get, the pattern seems to be that there's a lot of smoke coming from a lot of people. But until you have a full-blown fire, there's a hesitancy to do anything. And I don't know what that's about, but there must be a psychology to what that's about, that I'd like to understand better.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that fire is usually when it comes out in the media, right? And they're motivated by shame and embarrassment and
Right.
all that sort of thing. And we saw University of Idaho from day one with the student murders. We saw that pattern. We saw that they jumped in there, they took over the narrative. They were the only one talking. Scott Green's the only one who stood up and participated in press conferences, who writes a book before the trial, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, Chris, I think we have a clip. I think it might be worth playing a clip of the local news media in Idaho sitting down with a University of Idaho representative and putting these questions about the volleyball team allegations and the investigation to a spokesperson. I just think it's worth sharing, because I think the whole video will speak for itself.
Yeah, so this was an interview, a news interview that was done, and on Channel 7. There, hang on. Let me pull it up here.
A University of Idaho volleyball player says she and her teammates experienced almost daily abuse, harassment, and intimidation from their head coach.
Whitney Ward from our sister station in Spokane sat down with Emma Patterson one-on-one. And the Boise native said the university isn't doing enough to protect her and her teammates. Take a look.
Kind of immediately, you could tell something was off.
Emma Patterson has been playing volleyball since the 3rd grade. She started her college career in Alaska, but jumped at the chance last year to transfer to the University of Idaho.
I'm actually a 4th-generation Vandal. My mother and father, grandma, grandpa, great-grandmother, and great-grandfather all came through the university.
Let's see if Idaho can win a long one.
But she says her dream team quickly took a dark turn because of head coach Chris Gonzales.
He physically pushed a girl to the ground during practice when he had jumped into the drill, when he called the girls linebackers, implying that, that he's not feeding them well because they need to lose weight. Last year, there was a African-American girl on the team, and he made kind of racial comments about that.
Set. Then your side. Wow.
She says the abuse was almost daily, some players being targeted more than others, and some incidents dating back to the 2022 season when Gonzalez was first hired.
Now, I just want to say something real fast about that. That young lady is extremely brave.
Oh, yeah.
She is a hero.
She is a hero. Absolutely.
Absolute hero, because she is speaking, right, about, she's going against the power structure.
Yeah, and I want to, this will be coming up, it's only a couple minutes, but I want everybody to take notice of the demeanor of the University of Idaho spokesperson, the spokeswoman.
We talk about not building a culture, but rather building a set of values that are important to us.
Hearing about all of that and then combining that with my personal experiences this year really set off kind of the sirens of this needs to change.
What was it that made you feel like it wasn't just tough coaching, but something that rose to a level where it needed to be reported to the university?
When he started talking about being able to say and do anything he wants to the international girls on the team because they can't leave. And was
Okay, that right there, Gary. What do you think about that? That's exactly right.
That's
The most-
right along with what we're hypothesizing.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
So she's looking through a window and going, "Why is this person doing this? What's going on here?" And she's seeing the most vulnerable of the group, the international girls who are trapped on scholarships and or coming from other countries. And by the way, this makes sense now when he says he had 15 different jobs out of 21 years. I mean, that's like he leaves every year or year and a half and gets out of Dodge.
It's like when you go on a first date and you say to the person, "Well, tell me about your past relationships," and they say, "Well, I've been in 15 different relationships that lasted a few months each, whatever." I mean, wouldn't some part of you think, like, I doubt it was the women, the men, and I doubt it was them, or the men or the women, whoever. And you think it must be them, right? And it's that kind of thing. I mean, you really start to get the sense of a person who must systemically be doing the same thing everywhere he goes and doesn't seem to realize it, or gets out of Dodge before it culminates in any kind of real problem. In a lot of these situations, the way that the person gets away with it is the investigation is very quiet, and then the person agrees to leave without being fired. They just say, "I'll leave on my own." They get another job, and because people like you and care about you despite allegations, they say, "All right, we'll give you we'll say a good word about you, and you'll get that other job, and you'll be out of here, and you won't be in the situation that's setting all this stuff off. Look, you get out of here, we'll be happy, we're whole." And then they go and they do the same thing somewhere else, and the same process goes on and on and on. Someone has to be the one to say, "No, like, you shouldn't be near your kids anymore. You shouldn't be doing this anymore." And if the allegations are true, that the buck needs to stop somewhere. I mean, because how do you get through 15 jobs? I mean, and are all the times that you're at the jobs not working out related to the same thing? Well, that's the other thing I'll tell you. I've had times where I've had to evaluate people that are accused of things like this. And one of the things that's, I think, a telltale sign of where it's less likely to be the case, to be true, is when an accusation is made against a person that's been in a job like 40 years and has never had a single thing said about them. And then all of a sudden there's an accusation. Now, obviously, you take it seriously. There could be some deterioration, some life event causing it, drugs, alcohol, whatever. But usually these things are related to personality. And personality is sort of like, character's destiny, and it happens everywhere you go, over and over and over again. You don't become that kind of person at this guy's estimated age, right? So that the red flag is more like something obviously is going wrong over and over and over again. I mean, wouldn't you guys say? I mean, it would be very strange for this to be isolated. But if it were isolated, you'd be more inclined to really wonder if there was truth to it, especially if it was one accuser and totally out of nowhere, let's say when somebody's in their 50s or something, right? But this is like multiple accusers, stories that go back years, multiple jobs, and then it becomes such a no-brainer that then you can't understand 2 years, of not doing anything. And that's where I think you guys are starting to raise the question, was somebody protecting this guy? And why? Why turn a blind? What are they getting out of him? Is he some kind of master coach or something? Like, are there big trophies coming to the universe? Like, what could possibly be worth it? Right. And question we asked about the house. What could possibly be worth it? Right. Yeah. So,
Karen, thoughts?
No, I was just going to say, I mean, obviously nobody could play under this kind of abusive situation. And if they had a 1-27 season, that means they won once and they lost 27 times. So it's just like repeated punishment for these girls because it's a circle, right? I mean, of course, this guy isn't instilling or motivating them in any way. It's just the opposite. It's just it's mind-boggling to me.
But
It's
this
crazy.
is a dynamic I have seen, and again, can't make this guy's innocent to proven guilty. Okay, but I have seen in abuse dynamics with children that you want the child to fail because then you have a justification to be mean to them. The whole thing is that you say, "Oh, I told you if you didn't study, I was going to punish you. What's this A minus? Now I have an excuse to beat you." So that it's this thing of kind of looking like you care, but you don't really care, because the point is the power dynamic, not trying to foster the person to actually do well. Yes, buddy, that's right. So I think that's how you want to. It reminds me of Lassie, when Lassie would bark and they would know what he was saying. They'd be like, "What? There's a body in the well."
Or Steve Martin in The Jerk. Remember the dog? What? It's a fire? It's a fire?
Right, exactly. They'd be like, "What? What?"
But even Buddy gets it. Buddy gets it. I love the looks of the girls and just looking at him like, yeah, okay, sure, yeah. I'm going to keep playing this.
It feels like
keep
the
playing
power
this.
is the point. The power is the point of the whole thing, not actually producing anything.
Exactly.
Ignoring injuries. That's when it really started to become like, this isn't okay.
Last October, Emma filed this official complaint with the university's Office of Civil Rights and Investigations, claiming things like body shaming, ignoring medical advice, and putting players at greater risk of injury, withholding food, and creating a culture of fear, humiliation, embarrassment, and intimidation. She also says at one point, an assistant coach drove several players in a team van at almost 100 miles an hour. She shared this video with Creme 2 of the speedometer hovering just under 100. And when questioned about it later, Emma says the head coach dismissed their concerns and told the U of I athletic department that the women were making it up. Emma says the situation was so bad, the women asked that the official investigation be delayed until the end of the season.
We were informed that our names would be released to the coaches as soon as the investigation started. And we were so worried about retaliation and our safety that we didn't want him to still be responsible for our care and know who we are.
According to Emma's complaint here, she says more than a dozen players also endured similar abuse. And they often said that if they took those concerns directly to university officials to report it, they said they were often not taken seriously or sometimes outright dismissed.
So let me get this right. The girls come forward. This young lady comes forward, talks about, by the way, if you can go talk to these other 12 girls, they have a problem too. And what is the university? How do they respond to this? How do the coaches respond? We're just going to let you know that he's going to know everything you just said.
Yeah, we're not going to keep any of this. We're going to put your names out there. And so you guys will probably actually get more abuse because, the gig is up and he's going to know who said what.
I mean, that is classic. And then they circle the wagons and get their friends involved to shut this down.
It's a classic reason why people don't come forward. I have treated people that have been in abusive dynamics in jobs, sexual harassment dynamics, things like that. And they know that even if they go into some place at work and fill out a complaint or sit for a report, even if it's anonymous, you can deduce who the person is. So it'll say like, accuser says that at water cooler, person made inappropriate joke about, their body. It doesn't take a genius to figure out who who the person is, because the person who's accused will remember the incident. And so, of course, the people become afraid of retaliation. They keep their mouth shut. That is precisely why some of these people get away with it, because they know how to make comments that no one is going to dare report.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Did you want to say something else, Karen?
Yeah.
No, it's okay. We can just keep watching this.
Okay.
So I took those concerns to the top communications director here at the University of Idaho. When did the university first learn about these accusations against the volleyball coach?
So my understanding is the first allegations came into athletics and for review in October. Then on the request of the complainants, anything further was delayed. And then the investigation began then in December.
Does it concern the university that 13 young women have come forward and said that they have ongoing complaints?
Anytime there's a concern brought to the university, that's taken very seriously.
So I'm just going through this particular complaint from Emma. She addressed a number of things, including comments about looks, driving players to and from events at almost 100 miles an hour, retaliating if actions are reported. Are those particular things acceptable from coaching here at the University of Idaho?
I can't speak about a particular investigation or specific complaints.
But are those particular
I
things?
can't speak about them.
But in general, if anyone was doing that who was a staff member at the University of Idaho, do you think that those things are acceptable?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Emma received this notice from the university acknowledging her official complaint, saying if substantiated, the conduct could violate certain policies. It implemented a limited no contact order for everyone involved, saying communications should be restricted only to those necessary for official team activities.
Okay, so this is their MO. This is their MO. And now if we contrast this, I mean, if we really look at the big picture now, you know, taking a 30,000 foot view and looking down at the homicides and how they're handling just this particular problem. Okay, their whole MO is control and shut down the narrative. We control the narrative. We control the narrative. We control the narrative. Okay. And I don't know, Gary, from a psychological aspect of, I don't know if it's institutionalized. I don't know if it's driven by the leadership of the institution, but we just saw right there the position of the university is, well, all these are taken seriously. I'm not going to say anything about that one. And I'm not going to say anything about that one. And when you put them in a corner, that's exactly the position that they take, evident of the fact that we've been asking for the breakdown of the monies that were spent, $1 million that was sent to that university for counseling and for making everybody, you know, move on and feel better. But here they actually have actual victims as well who are complaining, and they come back with this crazy idea of, well, don't talk about it anymore. And if you do talk about it, just stick to, you know, how the volleyball goes up and the volleyball comes down. You know, thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I first of all, in fairness, I mean, you know, when people are involved in an investigation, I mean, you know, they talk less and they give you the boilerplate language and they say, I'm just not going to talk about that. I understand that. But the trouble is that the way, when you hear it, the way that you feel is very troubling. I mean, the whole thing reminds me of the same way I've been feeling personally about the whole Kohlberger trial. It feels like the point is not to get to justice. The point is to pull strings and kind of craft a narrative and then kind of evade ever getting to the point that you know, that's a way that you sort of never actually have to get to the trial, you know, that kind of thing. And I think that there's something about that all bleeds together in everything that seems to come out of this nexus of stories, is this idea of, I don't know, privilege and misogyny and evasion and string pulling and condescension and brain, you know, kind of toying with your head and making you think that you're crazy, you know, and insensitivity, and you can't quite put your finger on it, but it feels like it stinks from some kind of head down. And I don't know if it's cultural, you know, in the area. I don't know what it's about, but there's just something to it. Wouldn't you guys say? It feels like a big nexus of stories that all have the same theme. And I don't know how to explain it, but there has to be something to it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, well, very well said, Gary. The way you saw that.
It feels specific.
It does. And you know, when you said that, I was thinking, like, you know, even the tearing down of the house on King Road, it's like they didn't get you to a point where you're like, oh, well, maybe it's not that bad. No, it's that bad. It really is that bad. We haven't had a trial. You didn't wait for the jury. You know, I mean, in this case, oh, well, you know, okay, these are allegations, and, you know, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't happen. No, you know, it's almost, it's this such a need to control the narrative. And I mean, it's institutional there. This spokeswoman, it's when Chris and I first saw this, it's so outrageous that you just actually have to find the humor in it too. Reminded us of a Saturday Night Live skit, just her mannerism, how she's reacting to the questions. They're so defensive. Okay, we know that. It's like, it just feels like, is it so hard to just do the right thing? You're an institution, but they didn't leave the house. They had to tear down the house. Scott Green had to inject himself in a massive criminal investigation by writing a book. He couldn't wait. There's this hurry up. We gotta get rid of the stain of these murders that didn't happen on campus, that happened off campus. Oh, we've got over here, we've got these allegations. Oh, well, let's just do nothing. I'm going to correct that PIO. The reporter asked her, when did these allegations first surface? She said October, because she was referring to this, the 11-page complaint.
Right.
She forgot about all the emails from parents. She forgot about the grievance list that was signed by Scott Green's cousin's daughter. She forgot all about all that. October was not the first. It was a year earlier, at least, and pretty much the moment this volleyball coach stepped foot on the UI campus, the complaints started. So they're just, I get it. It's institutional protection, but we can call it out, and we can say, well, we're going to at least call it out. We're going to expose this. And it's not just us. I mean, again, going back to the reporters who've been writing about this, we point this out, and this culture of indifference, I mean, it's infuriating because they are able to get away with it.
Well,
they really are in some ways.
I'll say something that I think is worth contemplating, but may be troubling. One possibility is that attention has been drawn to one particular institution, and when you shake the trees at that institution, you find these incidents. But it might be that this misogynistic kind of callous quality is systematic everywhere. And if you were to shake the tree at any university, you would find stories like this. In other words, it may be that this is so systemic that we're living in a post-feminism world where, everyone from like politicians to people in, in the general public, bosses, husbands, etc. People trying to put feminism back in a box and put women back in a state of subjugation because they're angry about it. That everything is tilted toward, get back in your place, that kind of thing. And I think we see that in terms of crimes against women. We see it in the things that come out in the Me Too movement. We see it in the institutions. We see it everywhere. And I just kind of think that what you're seeing here is just a microcosm of what's probably going on in a lot of places. And that's why ultimately the whole system has to be revamped. I also think that the Koberger situation, if he's guilty, again, arises out of that kind of culture. A person who feels like a failure with women, feels entitled to take what he wants, take lives, go into a person's home while they're sleeping because you're so entitled, into the place of the greatest vulnerability, and just take what they want because you won't give it to me. I mean, you put all that together and you really start to understand it's a sickness in the culture. And this, what you're doing here is you're putting your finger on the pulse, but like using the microcosm of this institution. But I think it's everywhere. I hate to say it. It's a very troubling point. But I think that the points we're making can be applied to the workplaces and homes and environments of everywhere that women work and go to school and everywhere else. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I really think that this is a lot bigger than this university.
I would say this, Gary. I do absolutely agree with your point that it is systemic.
Yeah. Yes.
I think in the context of why we're even bringing this story on our channel and highlighting it, is because even at Florida State University, where Bundy went into the
Right.
sorority
The Chi
house,
Omega. Yeah, right.
Chi Omega on campus, Florida State University never inserted itself in his murder trial, period.
That's true.
Okay. So that's kind of the point where we're at. I'm sure there's many other examples, unfortunately. I'm sure there are other examples of, murders that happened actually on a campus. This one is, yes, I agree with you completely. It is systemic. We see it everywhere. The uniqueness about the University of Idaho in this particular case is they inserted themselves, again, day one into this case, and there are consequences. Whether we like it or not, we don't know what those consequences are. They haven't fully played out yet. We don't even have a trial date set yet. So
Right.
University of Idaho, by thinking they've got the narrative controlled, by tearing down the house, they think they've got this whole thing locked down. It really exposes them even more. Okay. And as I've said before, the more time that this trial takes to get underway, the more time there is to look at what is going on, what is the climate and culture at University of Idaho. And we are all still left scratching our heads. How could a university have been allowed to tear down the crime scene before the trial? We still think, I know all of us think that it will have huge, enormous consequences. And I think we're still trying to get our minds wrapped around that. And quite frankly, they do belong under the microscope. They voluntarily inserted themselves as an institution. And so, the public has a right to know of,
Absolutely.
okay, what is the culture and what is going on there? And, this volleyball example, this women's volleyball coach example is absolutely symptomatic of the symptoms.
I think what you're putting your finger on is the idea that it's systemic, but there are some examples that are more egregious than others, and but I think an interesting thought experiment to do is to contemplate how differently things would be going in the Kohberger case if his attorney were male. I wonder about that sometimes. There's something that seems to make it less obvious how much string pulling is going on against, in a case that involves predominantly female victims, where the whole thing smacks of the probable targeting of a female or females at the center of the whole thing. And it gets less obvious because the attorney is female. But I think if the attorney were male, you'd go, more of this crap, happening from a guy who's a master of this crap, kind of a thing. And so I just think those kinds of things are very interesting to think about, right? How it softens the blow. For example, the fact that the spokeswoman on that video was female. Imagine that had been a male sitting there saying, oh, we take all of these things very seriously, of course. It would have seemed more overt and more suspicious. There's something about that. I mean, wouldn't you guys say? It's an interesting thought experiment to do.
Karen?
It is, and I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, what if Ann Taylor was a male? What if his attorney,
very different
was? It
right.
Would. I think what we're seeing playing out in court is, I mean, it's a little obvious of the delays and what's going on, and of course, our heartstrings are pulled for the families who are waiting for justice, who are waiting for a trial date, who are waiting for the judge to make a decision, and so that piece can move forward. And that we had Christy and Steve Gonzalez on the show last week, as you know, and it's there's so many repercussions to the behavior and what we're seeing play out, and we have to let the trial process play out. Of course, we can call it as we see it. The University of Idaho, though, just going back to them, is, again, it's all, somebody in chat absolutely said it's power and control. It is. And to see that entity, they're not a part of the criminal investigation. They're a college. They're a for-profit business. And their involvement in this case has made it so obscure and so unique and bewildering too. The behaviors that we're seeing is bewildering. And at least when it comes to this, this volleyball situation, our hearts go out to those victims. I feel that those female victims, I think those female athletes, were victimized. Yeah, okay, great. Let's see if the allegations are true or not. 14 people are not independently making up the same story.
But it adds to the victimization, Karen, to then gaslight them. That's the whole thing.
100%.
Like
100%.
Victimization.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, for the university just to kind of step back and say, well, we're kind of looking into it, and then you find out it's their own team. It's you go to the wolf and the wolf says, yeah, man, there's a lot of sheep out there. Let me go take a look. And you hire another wolf to go look at the sheep.
Yeah.
And they re-victimize them. And I think, go ahead, hon.
No, I was just going to answer that question.
Oh, go ahead.
Never not speak out. Never not speak out. Right. And, common sense is document as much as you can, whatever that means, whatever that looks like. But if other students are dealing with abuse of any kind, document it, and dealing with, you can always appeal to local newspapers or local TV news media. In the Idaho case, the local news picked it up first. I don't know exactly at one point that the Orange County Register got involved. Orange County Register is a much bigger newspaper. Back in the day, I know they were award-winning. I'm sure some of their reporting is still very good. And to have a paper of that caliber, it's not just the local paper, but this is a big out-of-state, newspaper covering this, devoting time and energy and resources that, bringing sunshine to these cases can only help, right? I mean, keeping it quiet does nothing for anybody.
Well,
Gary, what were you going to say?
To the somebody's making the point in the chat of why documenting is so important, and I'll tell you why. Because one of the fears that I have, for example, in the Koberger case, is that part of the point of the endless delaying is to then be able to say, well, these eyewitness, you're talking about memories from years ago now. I mean, how accurate can those memories really be, right? And those memories were the basis of a search warrant that led to pretty damning stuff that was found in that home. So the point is to try to then be able to say, well, how do you know you remember it that way? Come on, you know how human memory is. It's been years now. So the idea is when you write things down in real time, those become very important evidence. Real-time notes, time-stamped, especially if you do them on a computer, so that it can't be claimed that you wrote them later. It's very, very important. Like in HR investigations and things at jobs, that's like super damning if you write it in real time on a computer, time-stamped, or email it to yourself, that kind of thing. I cannot tell you how important that advice is. If you're being abused systemically in that kind of situation, record, timestamp, email to yourself, and tell people, because everyone that you tell in real time is a witness too. That's right? So the person will say, well, we don't believe your story. Yeah, but at the time, 3 years ago, I was so upset. I talked to a friend of mine. I talked to my, this relative, and now they can remember it the same way independently. So I just want to emphasize to people, document, document, document. And what it sounds like is that, it looks like is that there was some of that going on here with the girls and with the women in the volleyball team, because those facts are laid out very meticulously. Somebody sat down, and I don't know if they were doing it in real time. I hope so, but somebody definitely finally got the idea they should take notes. And to HR or people in a Title IX or whatever, I'm sure they take into consideration that psychologically, the fact that someone feels driven to be writing it down and keeping track means that it feels really weird, icky, uncomfortable, wrong. and somebody knows that it has a legalistic feel to it. I need to be writing this down to protect myself. It speaks to how bad the dynamic is, how toxic that the person feels the need to do that. So, but wouldn't you guys say document, 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 and timestamp it so no one could call you a liar? And I hate to say it, I think that's what they're going to do to the witness in the Koberger case. I think they're going to take advantage of the time lapse that was created by the process itself to try to rip at the veracity of what she said and to try to attack the grounds for the warrant.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of dynamics with that for sure. And I've said it from the very beginning, and I'm on the record months and months ago. And you know, when I walked by and I saw that glove, and it's like, okay, we don't know if that glove's involved in anything. I mean, it could have belonged to the trash guy. We don't know. Nobody knows. But the fact that it was sitting there, okay, was like, okay, something's wrong here. Something's going on here. The fact that the cars to all the victims were sitting there still.
Yeah.
That it was like all these red flags started going up. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're behind the house, you're looking in, and you get that dynamic of, and okay, what was, you know, putting your mind in the perpetrator for a moment, because that's what we do, right, Gary? I mean, that's our profession, right. What we do.
Right. Okay. Well, we've done it in this case for quite a while now, and we've painted a very clear picture of what we think went on even before there was a suspect.
Yeah, you nailed it.
And I want to say, I think, because as predicted, it's coming up in the chat now, is that there was this hearing where the prosecutor himself, in the context of discussing these surveys that were done, that there was some unhappiness about, emphasized that Koberger is not accused of stalking. And so this is prompting people to say, oh, well, your entire picture of him was so based on the concept of stalking. Now they're saying there was no stalking. How do you change your mind about it? And I want to emphasize that, first of all, stalking has a highly specific definition, legal definition. I think they're talking about a very specific thing, like following the person on social media, making contact with them in person and threatening them, something like that. What we're talking about is, it's very simply this. You cannot have a victim that you do not know in your personal life, that you target, find out where they live, and go into their home without some aspect of stalking. It doesn't make any sense. Exactly. That's like saying I went to the store and I bought, you know, meat for dinner, or I bought a sandwich or something, but I didn't shop. Of course you did. You're just labeling it differently. It's the process of getting it is so that I think what they're really saying is, it's a kind of, what we're saying is, there was a kind of hunting and doing picking up intelligence gathering, surveillance, right? But that stalking in the way that they mean it is not part of the accusation, right? And but like, remember the whole thing about the story that came out on Dateline of messing with the stuff in the woman's house and then being invited in to put cameras and potentially watch her? Okay, I don't know anyone who wouldn't call that stalking.
Right? Exactly.
That's ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my entire life. So when I heard this, I was like, okay, why don't you explain to the public what you mean? Because you're making it sound like these were like people who were friends with each other, and then you go in and you kill the person. Whatever. Otherwise, it has to be stalking. Has to be. You just don't have to call it that. So let's stop calling it stalking. Let's call it monitoring, watching, peeping on, following in some way, you know, doing surveillance. We don't have to use the word stalking. Apparently it has a different meaning. So
go ahead, Karen.
Yeah.
Well, and the odd thing to me is that within the course of that hearing, prosecution said it wasn't stalking and defense agreed it wasn't stalking. Well, duh, of course the defense is going to say that. It's going to make her client look better. It was odd that both sides kind of agreed that there wasn't that they said there wasn't stalking. I agree with you 1,000%, Gary. You can call it something else, but clearly it was at play. Their own facts that they released in the affidavit said the guy was there 12 different times in 3 or 4 months. What do you call that?
Right.
Not only
visiting the trees behind the house.
Well, remember when Chris called? Chris said on your program, which I thought was brilliant. I didn't hear anyone else point it out. They had an electronics expert that was consulted. What the heck would you consult the person for if it wasn't to monitor somebody in some way?
He's an intrusion. He's a network intrusion expert with the Secret Service. And he wrote a report about it. It's in the affidavits.
I'm sure that was a coincidence, Chris.
Yeah. So, I mean, isn't this amazing though? This is how
semantics. Yeah.
This is how crazy we have become as a society. That one word defines whether or not somebody's right or wrong. Just one word. Oh my gosh!
Chris, I got messages from people who think that this implies that Brian is vindicated because experts said something that now the prosecution itself is fake. I mean, it's been totally taken out of context. By the way, if you watch the tape, it's very interesting. He says that there was no stalking of the victim, and then it changes to stalking of the witness, and then it becomes stalking the victim. It's just a slip of the tongue, but it fascinated me because if you take it out of context, as some people unfortunately did, you could turn that into anything you want. But I just wanted to say that because it was driving me a little batty. Chris, how many offenders have we talked to that target strangers? Every single thing they do is a form of stalking. That's a word. The word stalking comes from the construct of hunting, the way an animal does. And it simply means you have your eye on the prey and you watch what they do and you learn what they do so that they are vulnerable to your attack. When you understand it that way, it's all stalking, all of it. And but I guess they're going by the legal definition, so we'll stop calling it that. We need to come up with a new word. What do you want to call it?
Stalking. The bottom line of this whole thing is going to be, at the end of the day, when it goes to trial, I'll buy a lobster dinner for anybody. If somehow it doesn't show in those, tons and tons of terabytes of data that, Brian Koberger wasn't onto one or if not more of these girls in that building, period. I mean, your point, the fact that and she reports it, the girl, where he sets up the cameras, the fact that he did that, what do we call that then? I mean, what's that? Right? I mean, that's pre-incident behavior. And if that behavior is indicative of what's going to happen later on, well, then let's go back and IA, I don't know where that just came from, but let's just go back and look at that. And imagine being that girl in that room where he set those cameras up and was watching her. And when she's put on the stand, and the defense goes, well, he wasn't stalking you, was he? Imagine what she's going to feel when she says, well, yes, he was. He was watching me. Well, that's not stalking. That's watching. Okay. And you see those, try to cut those dynamics, like that. That's how crazy things get sometimes. And this is why I was so worried about that house coming down. And Karen knows because she had to drive home with me that day where I was telling her, honey, this is a huge mistake. I just feel so bad for those kids because it's going to be a huge problem. Because again, I'm going to say this one more time. The defense needs just one juror. Just a single juror to go, you know what? I would have liked to have gone and go see that house, or at least stand in the hallways and see what that girl said she saw, or hear what that person said they heard, or feel what that person said they felt, or correlate the sounds of that video that they have of the thug or whatever it is, the thump, the dog barking, etc. And the list goes on and on and on. You get one juror to say, I can't. I just can't make my mind up.
Right.
And then everybody's going to look back and go, that stalking word really wasn't that bad.
Well,
Yeah.
you combine that with now the house is gone and the angle, we've said this and you can see it on video, but you really get a flavor when you're there. That house was situated in such a way that there was a slope up the back, and we showed you walking around, especially that time of year, you could see right through to the different levels of the house. Now, if a normal house on a normal flat street, you probably couldn't. The specific angle of this house and where it was situated in the back, in the woods, you needed the house so people could actually go see it and be able to see in themselves. And that's what, Chris and I both felt that day, from the minute we got there and we saw it, and then obviously hearing they tore it down a year later, you're just like, I can't believe it. It was, let alone, Chris, your points of being in the house and feeling what it felt like to be in the house. There are the two surviving roommates, right? And Gary, to your point, the longer this goes, the more memories get cloudy, and the more leeway defense could manipulate it, truthfully.
Right. And in the meantime, in addition to all of these defenses requiring gaslighting people, you have the fact that there are human beings, family members, for example, of the victims in the Koberger case, who have to go to bed every night thinking that there's no closure on what to them rocked their entire world. It's enough pain to rock a continent that these people have felt, right? I mean, the idea of losing your child, I don't have to tell the two of you, the idea of losing the child is a pain that is beyond comparison. It is the one thing I can't treat when I work in psychotherapy with people. There is nothing to say to a person other than to try to help them make meaning out of it, try to help other people that are suffering. Time. There is no way to wrap your head about it. It is totally an upside down version of the reality that a person expects, that they are going to bury their own child. And the reality is that imagine going through that, and then on top of it, people thinking that it's perfectly acceptable that the clock is just going on and on and on and on and on, as if the pain is going to deaden and you're going to forget about it and we're all going to move on with our lives. And then on top of it, the symbolism of tearing the house down prematurely, as if it's an eyesore that we don't want to think about anymore, feels to me like telling those families, let's just come with one of those big brooms and just sweep everything away because we've got to move on with our lives. Well, they can't move on with their lives. I don't know if they ever will.
They won't.
And right. So it's tone deaf. That's what I think the common denominator is in all these things. Tone deaf, insensitive. And people have a right to be upset about that. And I think what's so beautiful about you drawing attention to this is that it is so validating to the people on the other side. That is why the family of one of the victims of this horrendous Koberger case uniquely trusted you to come on here and speak to the public, because you're the only people that probably among the only people in this world of true crime that get it, that they're feeling this way. And it's a beautiful thing to give them a place to do it. But I think that means that that's the closest to the truth they've seen. Right. And I can't imagine, for example, that if the women who are victimized, allegedly victimized by this coach are watching this, some of them are probably in tears, thinking somebody finally gets it. Somebody finally gets it. Thank God I'm not a crazy person. Right. So I really want to commend you for that. And I really want to put it into that kind of perspective. Of course, tearing the house down is horrendous, even if it were simply because one family member of one victim didn't want it. It was tone deaf to tear it down. What did you say, Chris?
That was very kind of you to say that, Gary. I mean, Karen and I have worked tirelessly to try to
The truth is the truth.
focus. Yeah, but to keep focus on the victims and their families. And, we always have felt that this platform, we made an agreement that this was going to be a safe place. And because it does, people can say whatever they want about me. I don't care. I've been there, done that, right? That, and more than anybody. And, I've been shot at 3 times, almost stabbed. I mean, I had a guy one night shoot at me 7 times, and it hit the dumpster that I was hiding behind. And I'm thinking, well, it's my time. And, God said, no, it's not yet. But one of the worst cases I ever had was a SA victim. And I've shared this only a few times and Karen knows, she was the wife of a FBI agent, and they had a domestic. He left, took the 4 kids. They went to a hotel room. Anyway, while she was sleeping, suspect broke in and brutally victimized her. And he had her 14-year-old daughter in the other bed. It was a twin bed or 2 queen beds. And he leans over while he's brutalizing the mother and says, "You're next." And so my heart has always been
right
with these victims. And we have become so hard as a society that we forget that these people are among us out there. And we need to treat them a little bit better, more respect. And, when I saw Christy and Steve and Karen and I talked to them before the show, and they had said to us, "We trust you." And I said, that means more to me than anything, than any of this YouTube stuff. It's, who cares? But we have built, I think, a really neat little family here in the interview room. And thanks to my sweetheart up there. I mean, she's the brains behind the operation. I will tell you that from day one. But, when she saw the injustice going on with these girls, and then she started asking me those questions, do you think this has anything to do with why they would have tore the house down? Is there anything connected to that, you think? And I said, I you know what? That's a really good question. And then she took off, and then you brought up the volleyball thing in totality, right? And here we are tonight with a really great group of people, in chat. And so anyway, I didn't mean to get emotional there for a second, but I apologize. But that said, Karen, sweetheart, I'm gonna have you give the last word tonight, if that's okay with you, Dr. Brucato.
Yes, I think everything that has to be said has been said, and I really think that in the simplest terms, what I would say is that what I love about this program, and the reason that I come on this program so much, and you don't see me on many shows, I get asked, I just don't go on many of them. And the reason I'm so excited about doing the podcast is, I really believe that what is so wonderful about this show is that it doubles as a kind of ministry. It does the work of God with people. And that's why I love the double meaning of the witness box, because it's legal term witness, but also the construct of witnessing in a different way. And I think it's really, really important to drive home, like Vernon Gaybreth always says, we work for God. Well, there's truth to that, because you have to remember what you're doing, Chris, is that you're bringing healing and justice and acceptance and peace to people. And I think that's why your audience loves the show so much. It's like they go to church on Sunday, some of them, and then come home and watch the interview room, like for another dose of spirituality or something. But there is a lot of truth to that. And, and remember, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, right? For they shall be filled. Well, there's truth to that. And I think that that's exactly what it is. It's a fight for what is right, not just what looks right in the eyes of people, but the higher thing, right? And that means looking at things from every angle and understanding that victimization is everything. Remember, Steve Gonzalez himself said that, if I remember correctly, that the house is like a victim. It's all part of the victimization, all of it. It's all part of it. And I think that to take a proper peek at it, you have to really grasp the victim doesn't just mean the person who is deceased. And it's the same thing you're seeing at this institution, the same thing, So I just really want to say before I tune out that, I think what you're doing is wonderful work. And I thought that episode where you talked to Gonzalez's family was a very important moment in their lives, a very healing moment in their lives. I hope you do the same thing happens with the kids, the volleyball kids.
If you haven't bought his book yet, would you please go to Amazon and buy this book? We got to get it back up there to the number 1 or number 2 spot. So Dr. Gary's been really busy and he's writing other books. We can't tell you what they are right now because they're in process. And also, if you're just coming in late tonight, we have a new podcast dropping next Wednesday. Will be the first episode. We've teamed up with the lab with Josh over there. And it's going to be Dr. Brucato, myself, and Josh. It's called The Witness Box. And it's going to be just a podcast. It's not going to be, video, maybe down the line. But we're just kicking it off next week. So that will be dropping next Tuesday or next Wednesday on all the platforms, Spotify, Apple, etc. It's going to be on every single one of them. And we're going to talk about not only true crime, but just open up kind of like stuff like this. And we're going to have a great program there. So,
and I have a favor to ask of people. I'm trying to decide on whether I should do something, and I'd like people's feedback. They can write to me if I'm on social media. I don't care. Say it here. But I've been thinking about recording an audiobook. Now that it's in the public domain, I want to do a reading of the entire run of the Sherlock Holmes stories with commentary on the cases. And I've had people tell me that, I don't know, they like my dulcet tones or something, but people tell me they want me to do audiobook reading. And I was thinking to myself, maybe I'll do that. And it might be something, Chris, that I could offer, like in a Patreon kind of a way. But if people like the idea, I have to tell you, I'd have a lot of fun doing it. I happen to love Sherlock Holmes, and I think people would enjoy the insights into the types of criminals, the deductive process, etc. They seem to like it. It's public domain now, so why not? And but let me know if I get enough votes for yes, I'll do it.
We're seeing a bunch of yeses.
Okay, good. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Yeah,
we'd all love it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to pull out here out of the screenshot here, and Karen, you have the last word about these young ladies. And Dr. Gary, thank you always for coming. We sure love you and appreciate you. So we're going to step out, Karen.
Okay.
Well, Gary, thank you. That was very kind of your comments on what you've said about the interview room and that we're a place that really honors victims. I would just wrap up by saying, for the University of Idaho women's volleyball team, we believe you, we stand with you, we support you in your fight for justice and what you've been through. As always, anytime we're talking about the Idaho student murders, we always want to remember the victims, of course, Kaylee, Maddie, Santa, and Ethan, who we've mentioned and talked about here. And our hearts go out to their families, Christy and Steve, Maddie's parents and her family, Ethan's parents, and same for Xana as well. We're going to continue to fight the fight here. It's not over. We always put victims first. You guys know that. And stay tuned. And we're grateful for you guys, grateful for your support and your love and your comments. And we just love our TIR family. So thank you all so much.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out, 24/7, babe, no timeouts, wish we could fly away, face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No one cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.